When Keanu Reeves saw his mother disrespected at a restaurant, the evening was calm, and the streets glowed with the soft lights of the city. Keanu Reeves walked beside his mother, holding the door open for her as they entered a small restaurant that looked warm and welcoming from the outside. He had chosen this place because he wanted her to relax, to enjoy a quiet dinner away from the noise of fame and the eyes of strangers. His mother had always lived a simple life, and tonight was meant to be about peace, about gratitude, about showing her how much she meant to him. But the moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The waiter at the front desk glanced at them, his eyes narrowing for a reason Keanu could not understand. The smile that should have greeted his mother was missing. Instead, there was a cold, dismissive tone when the waiter finally spoke. "Do you even have a reservation?" His words were sharp and they cut through the air like a blade. Keanu's mother smiled politely, her gentle voice answering, "No, but we were hoping there might be a table available." She carried herself with kindness, the way she always had, no matter the situation. But instead of treating her with respect, the waiter scoffed and muttered under his breath. His body language made it clear. He saw them as unworthy of his time. Keanu felt something stir inside him. He had spent his whole life learning to stay calm, to walk with humility even when the world tested him. But when he saw the slight tremble in his mother's hands, when he noticed her pretending not to care about the disrespect, he felt a deep pain rise in his chest. He remembered the sacrifices she had made for him. He remembered the nights she worked late, the mornings she walked miles just to keep their lives together, the way she always placed his needs before her own. She was his strength, his first teacher of kindness and resilience. And now, here she was, standing quietly while someone tried to humiliate her in front of others. For a moment, Keanu stayed silent. He watched carefully, hoping the waiter would correct his tone. But the disrespect continued. "We are fully booked," the waiter said quickly without even checking the reservation list. His eyes avoided theirs, as if they were invisible. Yet behind them, Keanu saw other guests being welcomed with warm smiles. His mother gently touched his arm, whispering, "It's all right. Let's not make a scene." Her voice carried the same humility that had guided him through his life. But Keanu knew this was not all right. This was about respect, something every human being deserved. He took a slow breath, keeping his voice calm but firm. My mother asked kindly. All you needed to do was answer with the same respect. His words were not loud, but they carried a weight that silenced the space around them. Nearby guests turned their heads, curious about what was happening. The waiter shifted uncomfortably, but his pride kept him from apologizing. Keanu's mother tried to smile again, trying to ease the moment, but he could see the quiet hurt in her eyes. That pain was heavier than anything else Keanu had ever carried. Then something unexpected happened. An older man, sitting at a table near the corner, stood up and walked over. He had been watching the whole time. His voice was steady as he said to the waiter, "Do you know who you are speaking to? This woman raised a son who has given hope to millions. She deserves your respect, whether you recognize her or not." The room fell silent. The weight of truth filled the air. Keanu's mother looked down, her eyes glassy with emotion. Keanu gently placed his arm around her shoulder, giving her the comfort she had once given him countless times. But the story was not just about this moment in the restaurant. This was the beginning of something deeper, a test of character, a test of humility, and a reminder of how kindness and respect can turn pain into strength. What happened that night would lead to choices that changed not only their evening, but also the lives of others who would hear about it later. Keanu knew one thing with certainty. Silence in the face of disrespect was not always the answer. Sometimes, the quietest voice of truth could be the loudest sound in the room, and in that moment, his mother's dignity was no longer hidden. It was shining, stronger than ever. The silence before the storm. The restaurant grew heavy with silence after. The old man's words. People at nearby tables whispered quietly, their eyes moving from the waiter to Keanu and his mother. It was as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The waiter's face turned red. Pride pushed against the truth he had just been confronted with. He tried to laugh it off, saying, "I did not mean anything by it. I was only doing my job." But his words sounded thin, like paper tearing in the wind. No one in the room believed him. Keanu looked at his mother. She smiled softly as if she wanted to end the matter there, but he knew that behind her smile was the same dignity she had carried through a lifetime of struggle. She was not weak, and she did not need pity. She needed what every person deserved. Respect. With calmness in his voice, Keanu said, "My mother does not need special treatment. She only asked to be spoken to kindly, the way you would speak to anyone else." Those words, spoken without anger, hit harder than any shout could have. People in the restaurant nodded quietly. Even strangers understood the truth when it was laid bare in such simple terms. The manager of the restaurant appeared then, drawn by the quiet tension. He was a man in his 40s, dressed in a sharp suit, and his eyes immediately scanned the room. "What is going on here?" he asked, his tone both concerned and cautious. Before the waiter could defend himself, the older man who had spoken earlier pointed toward him. "This young man disrespected a woman who deserved kindness," he said firmly. The manager turned to the waiter, and in that moment, something shifted. The waiter tried to argue, but his voice faltered. The truth was already clear. Keanu's mother placed her hand gently on her son's arm again. "Please," she whispered, "let's not ruin the evening. I only wanted to have dinner with you." Those words carried more emotion than any argument. Keanu nodded slowly, respecting her wish, but deep inside, he felt a storm forming. He had lived his life quietly, often choosing silence over conflict. But tonight, the silence had been broken. The manager quickly apologized. "Sir, ma'am, please forgive this behavior. There is a table ready for you. We would be honored if you stayed." Keanu studied his mother's face. She gave a small nod, agreeing to stay, not because she wanted to win, but because she wanted peace. So they followed the manager to a corner table, where soft light spilled over the wooden surface, and the quiet sound of music played in the background. As they sat down, Keanu noticed something. Other guests were watching not with pity, but with admiration. They had seen his calmness, his dignity, and his protection of his mother's respect. Yet inside, Keanu was not calm. He thought about the countless people in the world who faced such disrespect every day, people who did not have anyone to stand up for them, people whose voices went unheard. His heart grew heavy with the thought. As the waiter reluctantly brought them water, avoiding their eyes, Keanu whispered to his mother, "You taught me humility, but also strength. You always told me that silence is good, but not when it allows others to hurt someone. Tonight I understood that more clearly than ever." His mother's eyes softened. She reached across the table, holding his hand gently. "Keanu, life will always test us, sometimes with kindness, sometimes with cruelty. But remember, how you answer will always define who you are." Her words sank deep into his heart. They were more than advice. They were truth. But the night was not over. Outside the restaurant, two young men had been watching through the glass windows. They had recognized Keanu the moment he walked in. One of them whispered, "Did you see what happened? He stood up for his mother." The other nodded. "Yeah, but people like him get everything easy. Maybe it's time someone shows him what real struggle feels like." Their words were filled with envy and anger, seeds of trouble waiting to grow. Inside, Keanu and his mother had just ordered their meal. They did not know that shadows were forming outside, shadows that would test them in ways even deeper than what had already happened. For now, they shared a quiet smile across the table, holding on to the comfort of being together. But fate had already written the next chapter of the night, and it was far from peaceful. Shadows outside the glass, the dinner began with quiet moments of comfort. Keanu's mother lifted her cup of water slowly, smiling at her son as if the earlier insult no longer mattered. Her heart was calm, because she had lived through far worse. But for Keanu, the silence was heavy. He could still hear the harsh tone of the waiter in his mind. He could still feel the sting of seeing his mother treated as if she were invisible. His mother leaned forward, speaking in her gentle voice. "Do not carry anger with you, my son. Anger can grow heavy, and it will take away your peace." Keanu nodded, but deep inside, he wondered why respect was such a rare gift in the world. Why must people be reminded to treat others with kindness? Why did pride blind so many hearts? As they shared their food, the restaurant grew warmer. Laughter from other tables, the soft music playing in the background, and the flicker of candles gave the room a glow of peace. But outside the large glass windows, two young men watched closely. They had been waiting, whispering, their eyes full of resentment. "Look at him," one said bitterly. "Everyone looks at him like he is a hero. They do not know what real struggle feels like." The other smirked. "Maybe tonight we teach him." They moved away from the window, disappearing into the shadows of the street. The night outside was darker now, the streetlights casting long shapes across the ground. Inside, Keanu did not notice them. He was focused only on his mother, listening as she told stories from his childhood. She spoke about how he had once carried home a stray dog, how he had shared his food with neighbors even when they had little, how his heart had always been soft even when life was hard. Her words were full of love, and he listened carefully, each memory wrapping around him like a warm blanket. But suddenly, a sound outside broke the moment. It was sharp, like glass rattling, and Keanu's eyes moved quickly toward the window. He saw only shadows, but something inside him told him that the night was not as safe as it looked. His mother noticed his unease. "What is it?" she asked, softly. Keanu shook his head. "Maybe nothing, but sometimes silence hides danger." They finished their meal, and the manager personally came to their table. He bowed his head slightly and said, "Sir, ma'am, I am deeply sorry for what happened earlier. Please, allow me to cover your meal tonight." His mother responded kindly, "Thank you, but forgiveness is enough. What matters is how we learn from mistakes." Her humility struck even the manager, who stood speechless for a moment before walking away. Soon after, Keanu helped his mother with her coat, and together they stepped outside into the cool night air. The streets were quieter now. Only a few people walked in the distance. The sound of their footsteps echoed softly as they moved toward the car. But the shadows that had disappeared earlier were waiting. The two young men stepped forward, blocking the path. One of them forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Reeves," he said mockingly, "it must feel nice to have the world look up to you. But tell me, do you even know what real life is like?" Keanu's mother clutched his arm gently, sensing the tension. Keanu stayed calm, his voice steady as he replied, "Real life is not about fame or attention. It is about how you treat others, even when no one is watching." The words made the young men pause, but pride pushed them forward. The second one spat on the ground and said, "Easy for you to say when you live in comfort. People like us are invisible. No one cares about our pain." Keanu looked at them carefully. He could see the anger in their eyes, but he also saw something else: hurt, disappointment, a kind of emptiness that had hardened into rage. He understood that anger often comes from wounds that never healed. His mother whispered, "Let's walk away." But the men stepped closer, their voices rising. "Not tonight," one said. "Tonight you listen to us." The street grew colder, the night grew heavier, and Keanu knew this was not just about himself. This was about showing his mother, and even these two young men, that respect and dignity were not fragile. They were stronger than pride, stronger than cruelty. He stood taller, keeping his voice calm. "I am listening," he said. "Tell me your story." Those words caught them off guard. They had expected anger, maybe fear, but not this. The silence that followed was the beginning of a storm neither of them had planned for. Voices in the dark. The street was quiet, but the silence felt alive, as if the air itself was waiting for what would happen next. Keanu's calm words, "Tell me your story," hung in the cold night, heavier than any shout could have been. The two young men looked at each other. Their faces, once hardened with arrogance, flickered with something else for a brief moment. Uncertainty. They had expected confrontation, maybe even anger, but not an invitation to speak. The taller one clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "You think we want pity," he snapped. "We don't need your sympathy. We're tired of people like you pretending to understand." Keanu did not flinch. He kept his voice steady, his tone soft but firm. "I am not pretending. I want to hear. Because everyone has a story, and sometimes speaking it can take away the weight." The second young man's eyes darted between Keanu and his mother. His voice cracked as he said, "We grew up with nothing. No father, no support, no future. We watched people like you on TV smiling, living good lives, while we had to fight for scraps. Tell me, how is that fair?" His words were sharp, but behind them was pain. His voice trembled, not with hate alone, but with exhaustion from carrying, a burden too long. Keanu's mother spoke gently, her voice carrying the wisdom of age. "Life is not always fair. I have known hunger. I have known pain. I raised my son alone, and there were days I did not know if we would survive. But I never let bitterness take my heart, because bitterness only steals what little joy you have left." Her words fell softly, yet they struck like thunder. The young men shifted uneasily, their eyes revealing cracks in their armor of anger. Keanu stepped forward slowly, placing himself between his mother and the two men. "You see me as someone with comfort," he said. "But what you do not see are the nights I slept on floors, the times I lost the people I loved, the days I walked alone with nothing but sorrow in my hands. I know struggle, and I know pain. I do not say this to compare with yours, but to remind you that pain does not need to turn into cruelty." For a moment, the street was still. The young men were caught between pride and the pull of truth. Then, the taller one scoffed, though his voice was weaker now. "Words do not change hunger. Words do not give us jobs. Words do not erase years of being invisible." Keanu nodded. "You are right. Words alone are not enough. But they can be the beginning of something. They can be a seed. And a seed even, the smallest one, can grow into strength if you let it." His mother added softly, "You are not invisible tonight. You are seen. You are heard. The choice now is yours. Do you want to stay in the shadows of anger, or do you want to step into the light of change?" The younger one lowered his gaze, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His lips trembled, as if he wanted to speak but could not find the words. The taller one pulled at his arm. "Come on, let's go," he muttered. But the younger one did not move. Instead, he looked at Keanu and whispered, "My little brother, he died last winter. We could not afford medicine. No one helped us. I swore I would never forgive the world for that." His confession broke the tension. The anger in his voice melted into grief, raw and heavy. His friend tried to hush him, but the truth had already spilled out. Keanu's mother stepped closer, her eyes glistening with compassion. "Your pain is real, and I am sorry you carried it alone. But your brother would not want your heart to turn to stone. He would want you to live, to find strength, to rise." The young man's eyes filled with tears, and he quickly wiped them, ashamed of showing weakness. But the crack in his armor had grown wider. Keanu spoke gently. You cannot change the past, but you can honor him with how you live now. Let his memory guide you, not destroy you. For the first time, the younger man did not argue. He stayed, quiet, his head bowed, but the taller one's pride was not ready to surrender. He grabbed his friend's arm roughly and said, "Enough of this, let's leave." His tone was sharp, but his eyes betrayed unease. Keanu watched them carefully, knowing the night was far from over. Pride could still turn into violence, and grief could still sink into rage. The choice they made in the next few moments would shape not only their lives, but also the lesson this night would carry into the world. The breaking point. The night air grew colder as the tension thickened. The younger man still stood with his head lowered, torn between his grief and the strange calmness he had found in Keanu's words. But the taller one pulled at his arm with force, his pride refusing to bend. "Stop wasting time," he hissed. "Don't listen to him. People like him don't understand us." Keanu stayed calm, his voice steady, his eyes focused on the taller man. "I am listening," he said softly. "But you are not letting yourself be heard. Anger is loud, but truth is louder." Those words made the taller man's face twist with frustration. His pride burned hotter. The calmer Keanu remained. To him, Keanu's composure felt like a mirror showing his own weakness. "You talk like you know everything," the man snapped. "But where were you when we were starving? Where were you when doors closed in our faces? Men like me had to steal just to survive." Keanu took a slow breath. "I was not there for you, and I cannot change that. But I can stand here now, in front of you, and tell you that you are not alone anymore. You have a choice tonight, to keep fighting the world or to start healing from it." The man's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. Keanu's mother instinctively moved back, her hand tightening on her son's sleeve. But Keanu did not move. He stood tall, like a wall of calm against the storm in front of him. "Healing?" The man spat. "You think life gives us that chance? No. Life crushes us, and people like you walk away smiling." Keanu shook his head, gently. "Life crushed me too. I lost my father when I was a child. I lost the woman I loved. I lost my daughter. My heart broke in pieces, but I never let it turn into hate. I chose to carry pain with dignity, not with cruelty. That is why I am standing here telling you, there is another way." His words were simple, but they carried weight like mountains. The younger man lifted his head slowly, his eyes wide with shock. He whispered, You lost your daughter?" Keanu nodded, his voice low but clear. "Yes, and even in that darkness, I learned that pain can make you softer instead of harder. Pain can teach you how precious kindness is." The younger man's eyes filled again, and he turned away to hide his face. His shoulders shook silently, but the taller one roared, his pride breaking under the pressure of truth. "No! You think words heal? You think sorrow makes you strong? No, sorrow makes you weak. It makes you nothing." With that, he shoved Keanu hard against the wall. The sound of the impact echoed down the street. Keanu's mother gasped, her hand rising to her mouth, her eyes full of fear. Yet Keanu did not raise his fists. He did not shout. He simply looked into the man's eyes and said quietly, "If you believe sorrow makes you nothing, then you have not learned from it yet. Sorrow is a teacher. It is harsh, it is cruel, but it can shape you if you allow it." The man's chest rose and fell heavily, his anger like fire. But Keanu's calmness was like water, steady and unbroken. A small crowd had begun to gather at a distance. People who had left the restaurant earlier stopped to watch, sensing something powerful unfolding. Whispers spread among them, but none dared to step forward. The younger man finally broke down, falling to his knees. His hands covered his face as he sobbed.
"I am tired. I am so tired,"
he whispered. His grief filled the street, raw and unguarded. His friend looked down at him, torn between pride and loyalty. His fists loosened slightly, his anger shaken, by the sight of his companion breaking apart. Keanu's mother stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Listen to him. His soul is crying for peace. Do not drown him deeper with your pride. Lift him instead." The taller man's lips parted, but no words came. His chest heaved, his pride battling with the truth around him. Keanu placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Strength is not in how hard you fight others. True strength is in how you lift someone when they fall. Show him you are strong. Show him you care." The man's eyes glistened, but he quickly turned away, ashamed of the tears threatening to form. The street was silent again. The only sound was the quiet sobbing of the younger man, echoing in the night like a prayer no one expected. Yes, crack and pride. The night stood still, as if even the wind had paused to listen. The younger man's sobs echoed against the empty walls of the street, raw and honest, while his friend stood frozen beside him. The taller man's fists hung at his sides, no longer tight with anger, but trembling with something he could not name. Keanu's hand rested gently on his shoulder, not forceful, not demanding, only steady. "It is not weakness to feel," he said softly. "It is not shame to cry. The real shame is to bury your pain so deep that it destroys you and everyone around you." The taller man's chest rose sharply, as if those words struck the breath out of him. He wanted to shout, to push Keanu away again, but the weight of truth pressed too heavily on his heart. For the first time in years, his eyes burned, and he fought to hold back tears that threatened to fall. His friend looked up at him through wet eyes. "Please," the younger man whispered, his voice breaking. "We cannot keep living this way. I cannot carry this anger anymore. It is killing me." The taller man's jaw tightened, his pride fighting to stay alive. But his heart was cracking, the wall he had built around himself trembling under the weight of grief and compassion colliding. Keanu's mother stepped closer, her presence calm and warm. "Son," she said gently to the taller man, "do you know what true courage looks like? It is not in standing unbroken. It is in allowing yourself to break and still choosing to stand again." Her words were simple, but they pierced deep. The man's lips parted, but no words came out. He finally looked at her, and in her eyes he did not see judgment. He saw understanding, the kind he had been starving for his entire life. And then, as if the world wanted to test this fragile moment, headlights cut through the street. A car pulled up, and 3 strangers stepped out. Their faces carried the same roughness, the same hunger for trouble that the 2 young men once carried. One of them laughed harshly. "Well, well, what do we have here? A rich man and his mother being lectured by beggars?" The taller man stiffened. These were faces from his past, men he had once run with in darker days. They had shared nights of crime, of anger, of survival. He knew their voices, their cruelty, their emptiness. "Leave," he muttered, his voice low. But the leader sneered. "Leave? No, brother. We came to join. Looks like you found someone worth teaching a lesson." His eyes landed on Keanu and narrowed with malice. The younger man scrambled to his feet, his body shaking. "No," he said quickly, his voice trembling but firm. He listened to us. He cared." The others laughed cruelly. "Care? You think care fills stomachs? You think care gives you power?" The taller man's breathing grew heavy. This was the test. He could let old loyalties pull him back into the shadows, or he could choose a new path. Keanu stepped in front of his mother once more, his voice calm but unyielding. This night is not about lessons of hate. It is about choice. You can keep spreading pain, or you can finally stop and face yourselves. The new men scoffed, moving closer, their eyes sharp with threat. The crowd that had been watching from a distance whispered nervously, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Keanu's mother, standing tall despite her years, spoke once more, her voice clear. Every one of you was born with a heart. No matter how many wounds it carries, it can still beat for something better. The question is, do you want to live as slaves of your anger or as men of dignity? Her words silenced even the cruel laughter for a moment. The taller man looked from the strangers to Keanu, then to his sobbing friend. His body trembled. His pride was cracking, but his choice would decide everything. He clenched his fists, not in anger this time, but in struggle against himself. Finally, with a trembling voice, he shouted at the new men, "Enough! This ends tonight! I will not let you turn this into more darkness! I will not go back!" The silence that followed was heavy. The new men stared at him in disbelief. Their leader sneering, "You've gone soft." But the younger man stood beside his friend, his eyes wet but strong. "No," he said firmly, "he has found strength, and so have I." The street had turned into a battlefield, not of fists, but of hearts. The light at the end of the night, the street was now divided between two worlds, one of anger and cruelty, and another of compassion and dignity. Keanu stood with his mother behind him, steady and unshaken, while the two young men who had once confronted him now stood at a crossroads, their hearts trembling between the shadows of their past and the light of a new beginning. The group of strangers who had just arrived moved closer, their leader smirking as if he carried victory in his pocket. "Look at you," he mocked, pointing at the taller man. "You used to be one of us, strong, fearless, untouchable. Now you're standing here, soft like a child. Have you forgotten who you are?" The taller man's jaw clenched. His fists shook, but not with rage this time. He looked at Keanu, then at his friend, and finally at his own reflection in the dark glass of the restaurant window. For the first time, he did not see strength in cruelty. He saw emptiness. "No," he said quietly at first, then louder. "I have not forgotten who I am. I just realized I was wrong. Strength is not in breaking others. Strength is in lifting them." His words cut through the night like thunder. The leader of the group laughed cruelly. "Listen to him. He thinks kindness makes him powerful." But before he could step closer, Keanu moved forward, his presence calm yet unmovable. "Kindness does not make a man weak," he said firmly. "It makes him human, and humanity is stronger than cruelty will ever be." The leader sneered, but the crowd that had gathered nearby began to murmur. Strangers whispered to one another, their eyes shining with agreement. The truth was too clear to ignore. The younger man, still wiping tears from his face, found his voice. "We lived in anger all our lives, and it gave us nothing. Tonight, for the first time, I felt what it means to be seen, to be heard. I do not want to go back to shadows. I want to walk toward the light." His words broke something deep inside the taller man, too. He finally turned fully to the strangers who once called him brother. "Leave," he said firmly. "You no longer own me. My life will not be wasted in anger anymore." The group stared at him in shock. The leader spat on the ground, his pride refusing to bend. "You'll regret this," he growled. But his voice had lost its fire because he could already feel the shift in power. Slowly, the strangers stepped back toward their car. Their pride tried to keep their heads high, but their silence revealed the truth. They had been defeated, not by fists, but by dignity. When their car disappeared into the distance, the street felt lighter. The tension that had held everyone in fear melted into relief. Keanu's mother placed her hand on his arm, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "You see, my son," she whispered, "true battles are never won with anger. They are won when hearts learn to change." The taller man lowered his head, shame and gratitude mixing in his eyes. "I do not know why you stood here tonight, why you did not fight me with violence," he said quietly. "But you gave me something I never had before. Hope." Keanu smiled gently. "Hope does not belong to me. It belongs to you now. Carry it, protect it, and let it guide you." The younger man stepped closer, his voice trembling but sincere. "Thank you for listening, for not treating us like nothing." Keanu's mother touched his shoulder softly. "You are not nothing. You are someone who still has life ahead. Live it with dignity, and you will never be invisible again." Tears streamed down the young man's face, but they were no longer tears of bitterness. They were the tears of someone who had just begun to heal. The crowd that had gathered started to clap softly. Strangers who had watched the entire night unfold felt moved, as if they had witnessed something more powerful than any speech or lesson. They had seen respect, humility, resilience, and kindness defeat cruelty and pride. Keanu looked at his mother. She smiled at him, the same way she had smiled when he was a boy, proud of the man he had become. He gently held her hand, whispering, "Tonight was meant to be just a dinner, but it became a lesson for all of us." Together, they walked down the quiet street, the city lights glowing above them like stars. Behind them, two young men stood, taller than before, no longer trapped by anger, but guided by a spark of hope that had been lit by compassion. The night had begun with disrespect, but it ended with dignity. It began with shadows, but it ended with light. And for everyone who witnessed it, the memory of that night would never fade. It would live as a reminder that kindness, even in silence, has the power to change hearts, heal wounds, and rewrite the story of a life.